I want to talk about the assisted dying law. Now, I'll be straight up from the start. I have real conflict on this law. And it's a personal story. I thought that my mum passed away from motor neuron disease. And when she finally passed, it took about 3 years from woe to go, I was always thinking, I'd have a really clear understanding of what I think about assisted dying once I see what happens with mum. And I have to be really honest with you, it really, really confused me even more. About a week and a half before mum passed, she said to she was wheelchair bound at that stage because motor neuron disease basically stops your neurons firing and it stops so she couldn't really move. She didn't lose her voice, which was great because a lot of people lose their voice as well. But apparently one of my sisters said they were going out for a walk and she had her electric wheelchair and mum said to one of my sisters, if I could, I'd throw myself off a bridge right now. So she'd got to that point, right? And I hear that and I kind of go, of course, mum should be able to, for want of a better thing, go out the way she wants to go out. But for me, selfishly, I also look at that time, the last 24, 36, 48 hours that we spent with her in hospital. And when she passed, I stayed and everyone else left to go start organising things. And I stayed with mum after she had passed. And I ended up, helping the funeral director sort of wrap her and get her ready to go on to her next stage. And that's sort of my personal specialist time from when she passed. It was after she passed in that situation. And so I'm stuck there kind of going, mum would throw herself off a bridge. She should be able to make this. And then I'm going selfishly, I don't want to say the best time, the most special time was me and the lazy boy. Mum had passed, right? She was no longer with us. And I was in the lazy boy beside her for about 45 minutes, actually having a bit of a nap. And if we had done it the other way, I wouldn't have had that. So I'm really torn on this. Like I have real conflict about the thing overall, just to lay out where my thoughts are on the assisted dying. I've got some stuff to play to you. Do you have any commentary on that to start with? You got anything you want to add?
I think the fact that you're conflicted about this just shows that you're a functioning human. That's difficult, Like, it shouldn't be easy to let someone end their own life. But what you're describing, like if I was suffering from motor neuron disease, that sounds like a waking nightmare to me. And I think the one thing I take away from all of this, make your wishes known way before.
Yeah.
To everybody that'll listen to you, what your personal limits are. Because that has been the discussion around this law, is how to stop people taking advantage of people that can't speak up for themselves, that can't make their wishes known anymore.
And that's what they're looking at. They're looking at, there's a new members bill going through to look to get rid of the 6 month. Why don't should we just go have a bit of a listen? I'm only going to play, I had like 3 or 4 or 5 clips. I'll probably only play 2 plus a very short one, because I thought the first thing we could do is actually play this first clip, which is only about 90 seconds, which is actually Jack explaining what the current status is with this bill and where it's at.
As of late this week, a total of 964 people have died by legally sanctioned euthanasia in New Zealand. So that's about 1 New Zealander every day. After years of campaigning, 2/3 of New Zealand voters voted in support of the End of Life Choice Act in the 2020 referendum. And in November 2021, the law came into effect.
That gives them comfort, just knowing that that choice is there, even though they might not take it.
Te Whatu Ora publishes annual reports on assisted dying in New Zealand. In the first 5 months with the new law, there were more than 200 applications and a total of 66 assisted deaths in New Zealand. In the year that followed, there were 807 applications and 328 deaths. And in the most recent year to April, the numbers increased. 834 applications with 344 deaths. The demographic breakdown records stark differences between different groups. So last year, 82% of those who died by...
this is really interesting. The race breakdown or the ethnic breakdown, it seems to be something that Europeans, Pākehās, are like, yep, we'll top ourselves. Whereas other cultures have a different look on, I guess, the passing of life from one to another.
It's really
assisted
interesting.
Death were Pākehā, just 4% were Māori, 2% were Asian, and Pacific peoples made up less than 0.5%. When the end of life choice.
So I think actually that's our first point. So there's just some facts and figures around it in there as well. We'll go straight to. I just got to make sure we get the right clip now because I'm going to drop some 441. Yep, that's it. So the Todd Stephenson is the guy who's kind of championing this from ACT, and it's actually. It's, I don't say this often about ACT people, but it's quite an interesting conversation if you want to go check it out for yourself. There are some times where Jack challenges him about not having an opinion, and he's just basically like, well, I don't have an opinion on this. It's actually quite a it's quite a reasonable conversation of toing and froing between Jack and Mr. Stephenson. What we're going to jump in is one of the things you were talking about, Chewie, is about speaking up for those who don't speak up for themselves. So there is a thing called a competency gap in the testing for it, and we'll just talk to that first of all and have a look what they're saying about that.
So 50 people who qualified for an assisted death last year and had been assessed by medical practitioners were then unable to proceed to an assisted death because they were deemed to have lost competency. Would you support changes on the competency checks?
No, I want to keep the regime basically as it is. Again, there are a lot of checks and balances, and so being competent is one of the main criteria, and I think that needs to remain.
As the law stands, doctors are not allowed to raise the prospect of an assisted death as an option for terminally ill.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. So if you're terminally ill, a doctor can't say to you, well, there is the assisted dying option. They're not allowed to legally bring that option to you. You have to bring it to them.
I think that would come under their oath as well, right?
Yeah, well, but that's the whole point about this. The cause no harm, if that's what it is. How does anyone, commit something that's going to end someone's life? So I don't know, but that's part of the law right now is that doctors aren't allowed to say, there's that assisted dying thing. It has to go the other way. That's a legality of it.
Ill patients. Is the so-called gag clause appropriate?
Look, I've got an open mind on that. It's certainly not something my bill is aiming to address, but people have raised that issue. In fact, I was in a meeting last week when that was raised, and I think it's something that needs to be looked at. Again, we've also, though, got to balance the concerns that when the bill was passed at the time around coercion and making sure people are completely informed of all of their options. One of the other things I do like about our bill is that actually as part of the discussions, healthcare professionals do have to talk about all of their end-of-life choice options. So they are actually prevented a lot of information as they go through this process.
But you don't have a position on the gag clause?
Not at this stage. I do want to talk to people who have raised it. And again, it's usually members of the medical community.
See, he sounds quite balanced. Like I'm just being honest about this guy who happens to be an ACT. It's quite a genuine sort of a conversation between two people.
So yeah, I want to talk to them a bit more.
I mean, if you're in a position to put forward a members' bill and you think you have strong enough thoughts on the prospect of an assisted death, shouldn't you have a position on something like the gag clause?
No, well, let me talk about how my members' bill.
I will ask
because
about
I think
it,
that's
yeah.
important. But look, as I said, I have an open mind. We're going to obviously have the review, which will wind up in November. There'll be opportunity for people to raise other issues, and as I said, happy to talk to people about what they've raised. And as I said, we may be able to make further adjustments.
I will. Don't.
All right, so there is more to come. Anything you want to jump in with before we get to the next one, Joe?
Yeah, look, I was going to say, me, Pat, I'll jump on ACT any day for any reason. I don't see a problem with his answer there. Yeah. It sounds like someone with an open mind that is going to listen to practitioners about their positions.
Well, here's the strange thing. There's this guy in government saying, I'll listen to the experts. Maybe that's why it feels not such a mad answer.
That's why it's weird. That's why it's weird. I haven't heard it for a while. That's why it's weird.
Of course, one of the concerns that was laid out at the start was family coercion. Like if Nana's sitting on a 6-bedroom house in the middle of Remuera or Māori Hill or whatever, and it's worth a couple of mil, they might just want to shuffle her along. And apparently there is one case at the moment in the courts around this family coercion situation.
So there is an ongoing investigation at the moment into a complaint that someone was possibly subjected to family coercion. We checked, that complaint hasn't been fully processed yet by the authorities. But if that complaint is upheld, what responsibility do you think the state bears in facilitating the death of someone who might have been pressured into it?
Look, I think we need to obviously understand what the exact complaint was. But look, I think I'd come back to the point, the fact that we actually have this really rigorous regime and all of these safety measures in place means we know something about that, and the fact that people can actually bring forward their concerns and they're looked into. Look, I think this is a very sensitive area because, we are actually allowing the state to assist someone with a terminal illness who is going to die to have an assisted death. So I think there's a lot of responsibility here.
By the nature of assisted dying, though, would you accept that there is no way for us to fully, wholly know if people who have died by an assisted death might have been feeling a sense of coercion or pressure at the time?
Look, we can never know completely, but again, I'll go back, Jack. This is a very rigorous process. There's a first assessment, an independent assessment, and then a further discussion. So, I think all of the steps are in place, and I think what the data you actually have talked about shows that, there isn't big issues in this area.
Why do you think so few patients are being referred to a psychiatrist?
again, that's on the advice of those medical professionals making that assessment. They decide whether another, a psychiatrist is needed. Obviously, in most cases, that's not required. But again, we do see people being referred, and again, that's part of the safety mechanisms in this legislation.
Right, number 2. There you go, Chewy. I wasn't going to show that one, but we have got enough time. I know we've got to be out of here by 10:30 because that's the rules. But one more clip to play. You want to add anything in? So the coercion thing is the thing that most people are concerned about. Pushing old nana or granddad or dad or whoever it is, a bit faster than maybe they want to do it. Because there's always this thing as well of the sort of implicit or explicit coercion as well. If unhealthy person X or terminal person X feels like they're kind of getting the hint that the family's ready for them to go, if they feel like they're being a burden. So there's all those things as well, which is often part of the concern around this sort of thing.
That's a common thing from the very elderly, is that they don't want to be a bother and they don't want to be a burden. And that becomes a feedback loop in their own head, and they think that that's the only option. That might not be the view that's shared by their family at all. So, I mean, I think that's when they're talking about, hey, look, there needs to be a psychiatric assessment, they need to be of a sound mind. It's all of these things that are quite important. But yeah, it's such a tricky subject. Yeah, I'm still conflicted. When this law first started going through the select committee and that sort of thing, I was very pro it. I was like, yep, that makes sense, because I was looking at it from my own point of view. Yeah. Like I said, if I had something like motor neuron disease or something that got locked in my own body and my brain was still good, that sounds like hell to me. So I would want out. And then this is why it's so important to read other people's opinion. Then I read thoughts from people in the disabled community.
Yeah, which is why I put that chat up from Sun saying the same thing. Yeah.
And they had a very different opinion from me. And I read that and I was like, oh shit, this is something that I had not considered.
Yeah.
What happens if society decides that you're too much bother? Can this be weaponized against me in some way?
Part of this conversation, which we're not playing, is Jack says to the not minister, I mean, maybe, is he a minister? Anyway, the MP, is this government doing enough to support palliative care? One of the arguments has always been there should be nobody in any kind of palliative care that needs to be in pain. We have enough control over, pain-killing type drugs that there shouldn't have to be anyone being in pain at any stage. And, oh, hello, I'm going to come back. Might come back, might not. No, there you go. Hi.
There you go.
So that's something that is a part of this conversation as well, because if you knew your palliative care was going to be, you were going to be comfortable and you had time and versus if your palliative care, you're going to be in pain constantly for, there's a difference. There's a difference to how you make that decision, I suspect. But anyway, let's get to this last part. We're not going to show that clip, the one that I just talked about. This last one is talking about Mr. Stephenson's new members bill and what does it actually contain.
Let's talk about your members bill. What does it change?
Well, look, I'd been approached by people in the community, and again, I accepted a petition from
a group of people,
of people, signed by over 3,300 New Zealanders, and that related to a particular case of a New Zealander who couldn't access assisted dying because she could not meet the 6-month eligibility criteria. So, at the moment, there's 5 criteria, Jack, you've got to meet. You've got to be over 18 years of age and a New Zealand citizen and resident. You must be able to demonstrate that you're likely to die of a terminal illness within 6 months. You must be in a state of irreversible physical decline. Your pain cannot be controlled in a manner that, you find tolerable, and obviously you must have mental capability to make a decision. And so it really, that's a lot of criteria, but it's this 6 months, being able to prove that within 6 months that you're likely to die of your illness is causing some problems.
So that also means, like, let's use my mum as an example again, who got motor neuron disease. As soon as she got that diagnosis, without that 6-month thing, she could have said, I want out now. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I'm completely torn. I kind of believe everyone's got the right to do whatever they want with themselves. But expanding it out to family and those around you, do we want everyone with a diagnosis to then go, that's it, I'm done? People get diagnosed. I mean, we all know about some very famous people, comedians and stuff, who have been diagnosed with very serious cancer of recent times, who are pushing and fighting and still around a couple of years later. Someone gets that diagnosis because they just go, all right, do it now. I quite like that 6-month rule, but that's, I guess, what they're looking at. You want to add anything to that before I push play, Joey?
No, nothing to add.
If your member's bill was to become law, we would lose the 6-month provision, which would mean that anyone who was experiencing a terminal illness and met those other criteria would qualify for an assisted death.
That's correct.
So what is a terminal illness?
Well, it's obviously a serious illness where you are, as I said, going through a state of physical decline, which is irreversible.
I mean, like diabetes is a terminal illness.
No, but that can be treated. I think that's when these other criteria, like having a treatment that is acceptable or you can tolerate, is available.
But acceptable and tolerating is always in the eye of the beholder, right?
Yes, but that's why medical professionals make these assessments.
Right.
See what I mean? They're all very reasonable answers from him. He's not pushing an agenda or arguing with Jack, but he has an answer for it. Yes, I agree with you that that's in the eye of the beholder. That's why we have medical experts in there.
When this act was first passed, critics said that essentially it would be subject to a slippery slope, that by allowing any form of state-sanctioned assisted death would be opening up the doors to changes to eligibility in the future. And that seems to be exactly the case.
I don't accept that, Jack, actually. What we've put in place is a very safe law. And what we're trying to do here, Jack, is actually respect people's dignity in dying, give people who have made this choice with a serious illness the opportunity to decide the time and place of their death, be surrounded by loved ones. I mean, we're actually, if you look at the statistics, 80% of people choose to actually die in a private residence, often surrounded by loved ones, and that's been reported. And so this is really a very humane law that actually, for people with a serious terminal illness can have the option to choose.
If we were to lose that 6-month provision, though, I'm to think about it from the perspective of medical technology, and you've worked for pharmaceutical companies. So what's to say that a pharmaceutical company might not introduce a new drug that radically changes someone's prognosis in a period that's a bit longer than 6 months, so say 12 months' time?
The choice is coming back to the individual. If they want to decide that something might come up in the future, that's a decision for them to make. As I said, this is a person's individual decision to make about whether they want to access assisted dying and then work through the criteria. And I think that's the right way to go.
There you go. So they're the clips I'm going to show you from that. It's not, as I said at the start, just putting my cards on the table. I'm very torn about this legislation. I'm very torn about people choosing to assisted dying, to terminate their life. But I can also see it, like I said, I've already explained about my mum. I can see how at one stage, if she wanted it, she could have had it. And then there was this moment with the family that wouldn't have happened if that had gone that way. Although I do also accept that if she had gone down that path, I don't think it was available then, but if she had gone, we could have had that moment still. It would have been just organised, but I don't know whether it would or wouldn't. So, yeah.
Look,
so that's it.
I've got a couple of points to make about this interview. Okay, first of all, we've acknowledged that it is fucking jarring to hear someone go, you know what, I'm going to take some more advice and I'm going to consider it, and it's good to hear.
Jarring. Yeah.
It's good to hear, right? And that he should get a pat on the back.
I like you don't know what you just said. You went, it's good to hear, like it was a bit of a
yeah.
What, is it,
I'm surprised. Look, it should be acknowledged that this was a very good way to front an interview with Jack Tame, because it actually didn't give him that much. Like I think he was definitely there that I am pro this bill, but there are aspects of it that I have not reached a decision on. And I think the parts where he was like, yeah, look, it's a good bill, it does good things. I think he's accentuating the positive aspects of it, of the potential good, and also minimizing the potential bad, which is why that there's a review, right? To make sure that everything is working the way that it should be, which is good. I also want to acknowledge this comment from the chat. Wow, an intelligent ACT MP who can have a conversation. I do need to point out one thing, and this might count against him. This is the guy that was responsible for, he had some responsibility with the arts portfolio, and his explanation of his knowledge on arts is that he went to a Broadway show once.
Yeah.
He's also the guy that said maybe, just maybe, we should reserve medication for productive members of society only. So he's not exactly batting 100, but on this interview, he did pretty well.
Yeah, give baby his bottle.